I'm tired of talking about Mike Tomlin. I really am, guys. But the way I function personally is that I cannot go to sleep at night. I cannot do my daily tasks. I can't do really anything until I get what's inside my mind out in the open and I talk about it. That's just how I function. And honestly, if I literally just download any one of my other Tomlin videos that I put out earlier this season and just re-uploaded it right now, you honestly wouldn't know the difference between this video and the other ones. So, kind of to just put a bow on this 2023-24 season for the Steelers, because this season was very frustrating for me personally. Lot of things went wrong. A lot of stuff just didn't go our way. Like I said, you make all these moves in the offseason. You supposedly fix up the offensive line. You supposedly fix up the interior linebacking core. You make these moves in the draft. New GM. First full season as GM. And the result is pretty much the same. You're mediocre. You barely get in the playoffs. You have to rely on other teams to help you to get in the playoffs, when before you just took care of the job yourself, because that used to be the standard for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But ever since this guy Tomlin has been the head coach, these guys realize that this was the eighth time that the Steelers needed help getting into the playoffs because they couldn't do the job themselves. And we kept using the same excuse over and over and over again in years past. It's because of the players. It's because the team's young. It's because the defense stinks. It's because our offense is stale. It's because of the coordinators. It's because of whatever. You know, coordinators come and go. Players come and go. But who stayed here the entire time during all of this? Mike Tomlin. He's the one constant, the one common denominator, and the one thing that the Steelers just really need to move on from. Okay, a lot of people are saying, oh, now is the time because they lose yet another playoff game, and, you know, they make the playoffs once again when they had no business being in the playoffs. It's been time for this guy to go for years. But, of course, because he's had no losing seasons, because, yay, the Titans beat Jacksonville, that got us to the playoffs. We don't need no stinking Super Bowls. We've just made the playoffs. You know, Mike Tomlin's going to guide us to yet another non-losing season. Well, actually, he does have a losing record. He's now 8-10 in the playoffs. And whether that's fair or not, that's just how it is. When you are a fan of a franchise like Pittsburgh, New England, Green Bay, Dallas, San Francisco, Denver, I'll even throw the Baltimore Ravens up there. I'll even put Kansas City up there. You get the drift. When you are a fan of a franchise that has had rich Super Bowl success, guess what? Your expectations and your standards go up a notch. And like I said, whether it's fair or not, you're judged by what you do in the playoffs. Okay? There's a reason the Dallas Cowboys constantly get ridiculed by the media, more specifically with Stephen A. Smith, okay? There's a reason for that. Because the Cowboys ain't won a Super Bowl since January of '96. They haven't even made it to a conference championship since then. And the media tears them a new one whenever the Cowboys come up short in the playoffs, which is quite a bit over the last almost 30 years. There's a reason everyone has ridiculed Aaron Rodgers when he was with Green Bay. It's because the Packers kept coming up short in the playoffs since winning Super Bowl 45 over us. And that leads me into the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's a reason that the Steelers keep up coming short in the playoffs since losing Super Bowl 45. Okay? Do you guys realize that this is the longest playoff win drought that the Steelers have had since before Franco's Immaculate Reception? And the previous streak before that was from 2011 to 2014. Guess who was the head coach back then as well? Oh, gee, I wonder. It was Mike Tomlin. Did Bill Cowher ever go 7 seasons without a playoff win? Did Bill Cowher ever lose 5 straight playoff games, let alone in all 5 of them you allow at least 30 points in every single one of them? Did Chuck Noll ever do that? No. But Mike Tomlin has. But yet because he can't finish below 500, but yet because he barely finishes above 500 for that matter, that's his pass. That justifies him staying here. What does 2011 to 2014, the Killer Bees, Big Ben's twilight, and now post-Big Ben all have in common? Mike Tomlin was the head coach. And Mike Tomlin is the head coach. And if the rumors are true, I don't know if it's been confirmed yet, because I'm recording this right now at 11:50 at night, okay? So I don't know, I haven't heard if the rumors are true yet, but if they are, and Mike Tomlin is in fact coming back for 2024, I'm telling you guys this right now, you may as well write off 2024, because it's going to be the same thing week in and week out. A stagnant, mediocre, static, complacent, just underwhelming season that the Steelers are going to stumble ass backwards into another non-losing season, and they'll either barely squeak into the playoffs, most likely as the 7th seed, and then they'll get destroyed in the wild card once again by a far superior team, or they'll just miss the playoffs altogether. That's Mike Tomlin's standard. It's not winning the Super Bowl. It's not going on a deep playoff run. Like I said, I don't expect us to win the Super Bowl every year. It's unrealistic and it's unfair. But I do expect us to be competitive. Okay? And I don't give a crap what the final score was of the playoff game. That playoff game, no, it was not. It was not competitive. It was 24-17 at one point. Yeah, no crap, it was a 7-point game at one point. Because once again, the Steelers found themselves in a big hole early on. And they figured to themselves, wow, we play a playoff game today. We better stat pad. So all the stat nerds and the scoreboard geeks will be like, see, they were competitive in the game. See, Tomlin is the head coach of this team, of this franchise going forward. Yeah, you came up short once again. And they wouldn't have even been in this situation, sitting at 7-4, entering week 13, if you, say, didn't drop 2 consecutive games in 4 days to 2 two-win teams. Both of them at home. And that's another thing. You keep dropping games that you shouldn't lose. You, allow them to make a mockery of you, getting blown away by all these elite teams, losing to rookie head coaches, losing to rookie quarterbacks. I mean, is this what you want going forward? Just mediocrity? Really? Because I don't. That's not what I want. I want to see this team be a legit contender. You hardly ever saw Cowher get embarrassed. You hardly ever saw Cowher, get demolished by a lesser team. But of course, because Tomlin, did not evaluate, as he likes to say, the word salads that he has in all his press conferences, because Tomlin is too stubborn to admit that he did not evaluate Kenny Pickett's development correctly, he ain't going to give up on him. And let me put it to you like this. Look at Cowher's years. Look at that 03 season, which I know it still remains the last time this franchise had a losing season. I get it. But look at that 03 team. They were coming off a playoff game in which they dropped it to Tennessee in a hard-fought game. Joe Nedney did flop, by the way, okay? But 03 came along and Cowher thought to himself, wow, Tommy Maddox had the season that he had. And we still got the bus. We still got this defense. Maybe, we do have that quarterback in Tommy Maddox. What happens? The bus goes down with injuries, and Tommy Maddox shows that 02 season was a fluke. Cowher admitted he was wrong, and then that's when the draft in 04 came along, and Big Ben fell into our laps, and the rest is history. Tomlin will never admit that he screwed up with Kenny Pickett, and now he doesn't want to give up on him, even though Mason Rudolph is clearly the better option between the two. I mean, Mason Rudolph, in my opinion, is not a franchise quarterback. I don't think he'll ever be that. But you know what? He's proven in the starts that he had this season with us that he is a serviceable, capable, quality starter in this league that can win you games. But yet Tomlin is so infatuated with Kenny Pickett for whatever reason, and he's not going to give up on him. And that's why Tomlin is not solely to blame, but he's mostly to blame to this. Like, where does this all come from? To me, it starts with Art Rooney II. This all starts with ownership. I mean, geez, man, if Tomlin can fool me at the beginning of the season with how this team was in preseason, oh my God, he can fool anybody. And I'm not an easy person to fool, okay? I don't like being fooled. But hey, Tomlin managed to do that. He can fool anybody. I mean, Artie II's a million years old. Mike Tomlin is, 51, 52 years old, something like that. I know he's at least in his 50s. He's old enough to be my dad. Yinz guys should know how old I am right now. I'm old enough to be a dad myself. But the fact is, with all these personnel mishaps, with all these coordinators not panning out, with all these players not panning out, with the sloppy defense that he continues to throw at teams, he hasn't learned anything. And that's why when I'm talking about a culture change, when I'm talking about a coaching change, the whole thing has to go away with Tomlin. I'm talking about a new head coach, a real offensive coordinator. If you absolutely have to keep Mike Sullivan and Eddie Faulkner, put them back at the quarterback coach and the running back coach positions respectively, which is what they should be. Do not promote these guys to offensive coordinator based on a small sample size. Go out and get a real offensive coordinator. Get a new defensive coordinator and really make a culture change. I mean, for God's sake, Najee Harris said himself that there's no accountability. There's no, there's no one taking responsibility, and Tomlin just throws caution in the wind and just says stuff for the sake of saying things. I mean, I know that's not exactly what Najee said, but it's between, I'm paraphrasing, okay? To me, that sounds like a coaching problem. And like I said, this is all a reflection of Art Rooney II, which is why I sit down here and say loyalty is one of the worst traits to have when you're the owner of a sports team, because it creates stubbornness and it creates complacency. And if Artie II won't pressure Tomlin for him to go down and for him to leave, then the only way that the Steelers make a change is if Mike Tomlin is out of the equation completely, because it's the best thing to happen at this point, and it's how this franchise can truly get better and get back to how they were the once formidable franchise and Super Bowl contender that they were before this new standard has come along. But don't worry, I know what people are going to say down in the comments. Well, prepare for losing seasons. I say we're long overdue for a losing season. Okay? And we should have had it this year. We should have had it this year. We all know Kenny Pickett doesn't get injured in that, what was it, the Cardinals game, I think it was. We all know Kenny Pickett doesn't get injured in the Cardinals game, and even if it does happen still, and Tomlin still rolls with Mitch Trubisky, this team easily would have lost out. We all know it. Okay? I say we're long overdue for a losing season. And you know what? That's fine. That's fine if you just go through a short rebuilding phase like Bill Cowher did in the late 90s, and you have a couple of down years, and you nail drafts, and then you're right back to where you were. I've seen so many teams in this league turn their franchise around in a year or two. Meanwhile, where are the Steelers? Not going forward, not going backward. They're just stuck in limbo. Mediocre. Mid. No one's afraid to play us. You think Buffalo was afraid to play us? You think they were intimidated by us? Not one bit. But that's what this franchise has come to accept. That we just made the playoffs, so everything's all fine, and we don't got to change anything. Well, here's the thing. If you made the playoffs during with a team like this, and Mike Tomlin is supposedly this Hall of Fame head coach that everyone says that he is because of his precious, pointless streak of not having a losing season, then how come he couldn't go out there against a team like Buffalo and at least make it competitive? And I understand you can't blame Tomlin for when players make mistakes. You can't blame Tomlin for when stuff like fumbles happen, or Mason Rudolph throws an interception in the red zone. I get that's not Tomlin's fault. What is his fault is how unprepared and how unassertive and how unaggressive the team was, and how they have the mindset of, well, we're down big, so we better stat pad for the rest of the game to make it look respectable. That's on Tomlin. Saw it against Kansas City. They were down big to them early on. Saw that against Cleveland, down 28-0 to them. Saw that against Jacksonville, down 21-0 to them. Saw that again in the AFC Championship game where they repeatedly played zone defense against Tom Brady. And if you know anything about Tom Brady, any moron could see that Brady shredded zone defense his whole career. Shredded it like how the court shredded Trump's impeachment documents. Saw that back in 2011 in the infamous Tim Tebow game, if you want to take it back a few years. That is on Tomlin. And this franchise has just come to accept that making the wild card, winning 9 games every year is good enough. Like I've said a million times, it's one thing if you're a fan of a fan of a franchise like Detroit, and I'm not knocking at Detroit at all. Okay, as a matter of fact, I hope they win the whole thing now that the Steelers are out of it. I hope the magical run for them continues. I hope the Lions win it all. Okay. But it's one thing if you're a fan of a franchise like Detroit, like Houston, Jacksonville, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Minnesota. You get it. Franchises that don't have our history. And it's like, well, yeah, we won 10 games with a young team. We won 10 games. We had a streak at the end of the season. We made the wild card and lost in the wild card. But hey, it was a good season. That's one thing. And you're talking about a new culture change, like I said. Everyone's comeback with Tomlin needing to go is, whoa, who are you going to replace him with? You morons act like that there are no candidates this offseason. The possibilities this offseason are endless. I mean, for God's sake, Atlanta is rumored to bring Jim Harbaugh in for an interview. Speaking of Detroit, what about Ben Johnson? What about Brian Johnson? What about Nick Sirianni? What about Zach Robinson? I'll even throw Bill Belichick in there. Even though I'm strongly against it, but he's a candidate. That's my comeback to you, Tomlin stands. The ones that say, oh, who are you going to replace him with? I just named you a handful of candidates right off the top of my head. But don't worry, I know what your backpedal is. Oh, Tomlin's not going anywhere. You may as well just storm out of that conversation, just like how Tomlin stormed out of the press conference when he was asked about the remaining years on his contract or whatever the question was. I don't know what the question was because that jackass didn't even let the reporter finish asking the question. So, like I said, enjoy your participation trophies. Enjoy another mediocre season because that's just what you're getting should this guy come back in 2024. It really is a shame what this once proud franchise that cared about winning has become. They've settled for mediocrity. And I don't tolerate it. Anyway, let me know what you think down in the comments below. I am Mac, checking on out for the day. Have a good one, everybody.